Have you ever wondered what retired female soldiers do when faced with injustice? Especially child abuse survivors who spent 15 years trained to eliminate enemies and now see innocent children being harmed in civilian life? Phoenix, Arizona, last 21 days. For mysterious deaths, all male, all ages 35 to 45. But this wasn't an ordinary serial killer case. Victim number 1, Marcus Hendricks. 38 convicted child molester recently released after 3 years in prison. Cause of death? Single stab wound, intercostal space between 4th and 5th rib, direct cardiac penetration. Instant death, professional technique. Victim number 2, David Coleman. Get. 42 registered sex offender, had abused his 6-year-old daughter. Cause of death. Identical method, same precision, same anatomical knowledge. No defensive wounds, victims couldn't even resist. Victim number 3, Robert Torres. 39, kindergarten teacher fired for inappropriate contact. Same kill method, same surgical precision. Coroner's comment. This level of anatomical accuracy requires advanced combat training. Victim number 4, Kevin Walsh. 44, convicted pedophile, recently spotted near school playground. Death pattern identical. What Phoenix PD discovered, this wasn't random killings, but systematic elimination of child predators. FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit's Special Agent Lisa Park immediately recognized the pattern when reviewing the case. Kill method from Delta Force CQC, close quarters combat training. Specific technique, silent takedown method 7 alpha, instant kill, stopping the heart. Zero sound, zero struggle, and that technique was only taught to Delta Force Tier 1 operators. When they searched for retired Delta Force personnel in the Phoenix area, one name emerged, Catherine Reaper Hayes. Service record, 15 years active duty, 3 combat deployments Afghanistan, 47 confirmed kills, specialized CQC instructor. Retirement reason, personal trauma resolution, classified details. But FBI psychological profile had a note, childhood sexual abuse survivor, protective instincts toward children extremely heightened. Current status, Phoenix resident 6 years. Works part-time at animal rescue clinic, lives alone, no criminal record, no social connections, perfect invisible profile. And the only woman in Phoenix who would know that specific kill technique. But the big question was Catherine Hayes a serial killer or a vigilante protector systematically eliminating Phoenix's child predators? As the FBI searched for this answer, 5th potential victim Kevin Morrison, convicted child abuser, recently out on parole, had been reported missing, and Catherine Hayes had the tactical intelligence to anticipate the FBI's every move. This wasn't just a murder investigation. This was the ultimate confrontation between child protection versus legal system, military training versus civilian justice, and personal trauma versus professional duty. Phoenix PD and FBI were now searching for Catherine Hayes, but they didn't know that Catherine was already monitoring them, planning her next moves, and if she was truly guilty, she wasn't planning to be caught. ... Welcome to Human Stories. Before we continue with this complex tale of justice, trauma, and the thin line between hero and villain, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe these stories of moral complexity deserve to be explored, hit that subscribe button. The Paws and Claws Animal Rescue Center on the outskirts of Phoenix had been Catherine Hayes' sanctuary for exactly 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days. The small facility rescued abandoned and abused animals, providing medical care and rehabilitation before finding them permanent homes. It was quiet work, healing work, the kind of purposeful activity that helped fill the hours and keep darker. Thoughts at Bay. Catherine arrived every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. for the full-time staff and spent her shifts cleaning kennels, administering medications, and working with animals that had suffered trauma. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Damaged creatures learning to trust again, finding peace after violence, rebuilding lives that had been broken by forces beyond their control. At 42, Catherine looked like any other volunteer at the shelter. Average. Height, brown hair usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing scrubs and sneakers that could withstand the daily mess of animal care. She spoke softly to the animals, moved with calm efficiency, rarely discussed her personal life with the other volunteers. What they didn't know was that Catherine Hayes had spent 15 years as one of the most lethal operators in the U.S. military. Staff: Sergeant Catherine Reaper Hayes. Delta Force: 47 confirmed kills. Instructor in close quarters combat techniques that were classified at the highest levels. What they also didn't know was why she'd earned the nickname Reaper, or why she'd left active duty at the peak of her career to work with traumatized animals in the Arizona desert. That Thursday morning started like dozens of others, until Catherine's phone buzzed with a news alert that made her hands still on the dog leash she was adjusting. Phoenix police seeking information on fourth homicide victim with similar pattern of violence. Catherine read the article with the clinical attention to detail that had been drilled into her during years of intelligence briefings. For men, all with histories of crimes against children, all killed with identical precision. The article didn't mention the specific method. Police rarely release those details, but Catherine could guess. She recognized the technique being described because she'd taught it to dozens of soldiers. During her years as a CQC instructor, silent takedown method 7 alpha, a single blade insertion between the fourth and fifth ribs, angled upward to pierce the heart, causing immediate cardiac arrest with minimal blood loss and no opportunity for the victim to cry out. It was a technique developed for eliminating high-value targets in close quarters without alerting nearby enemies. It required precise anatomical knowledge, steady nerves, and extensive training to execute correctly. Catherine finished her shift at the animal shelter with her usual methodical care, but her mind was processing the implications of what she'd read. Someone in Phoenix was using military assassination techniques to kill child predators, someone with Delta Force training. That evening, as she sat in her small apartment overlooking the desert, Catherine's secure satellite phone rang. Only 3 people had that number, and 2 of them were dead. Catherine. The voice belonged to Colonel Sarah Mitchell, her former commanding officer and one of the few people who knew the complete truth about Catherine's military service and subsequent retirement. Colonel, I assume you've seen the news about Phoenix. Catherine was quiet for a moment. I've seen it. The FBI is going to find you, Catherine. Your name is in the database of retired Delta Force personnel in the Phoenix area when they run the analysis. On those kill methods, you're going to be their prime suspect. I know. Did you do it? The question hung between them like a challenge. Colonel Mitchell had known Catherine for 12 years, had seen her in combat, had debriefed her after operations that remained classified, and had been present during the investigation that led to Catherine's retirement from active duty. Would it matter if I had? Catherine asked finally. It would matter to me, and it's going to matter to the FBI. Catherine walked to her window and looked out at the lights of Phoenix spreading across the desert floor. Somewhere in that sprawl of humanity, there were children being hurt by predators who had already been caught, convicted, and released back into society to hurt again. The justice system failed those children, Sarah. 4 men with documented histories of child abuse, all walking free, all within miles of schools and playgrounds. That doesn't answer my question. Catherine was quiet for so long that Colonel Mitchell thought the connection had been lost. No, Catherine said finally. I didn't kill them, but I understand why someone did. Catherine, I need you to listen. To me, very carefully. Your psychological profile is going to make you the perfect suspect for this. Childhood abuse survivor, military training, social isolation, protective instincts toward children. The FBI is going to build a case that fits you perfectly. Because it does fit me perfectly, Catherine said. Everything except the actual killing, then we need to prove that. I'm flying to Phoenix tomorrow, after Colonel Mitchell disconnected. Catherine sat in the darkness of her apartment, thinking about the conversation and the implications of what was happening. She'd spent 6 years building a quiet life, finding peace through helping damaged animals, staying away from violence and the complex moral calculations that had defined her military career. But violence had found her anyway, and now she was being forced back into a world where the difference between justice and murder was measured in legal technicalities rather than the protection of innocent lives. The next morning, Special Agent Lisa Park of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit stood outside Catherine's apartment complex, studying the building and the surrounding area. She'd spent the previous evening reviewing Catherine's military file, portions that weren't classified, and building a psychological profile of their primary suspect. Catherine Hayes was a textbook example of a trauma victim turned protector. Sexually abused as a child by her stepfather, she'd joined the military at 18 and excelled in roles that allowed her to eliminate threats. Her service record showed exceptional performance in combat situations and unusual skill in close quarters. Combat training. But her retirement had been sudden and under circumstances that remained classified. The file contained references to a triggering incident and recommendation for intensive psychological evaluation, but the details were redacted. Agent Parks. Working theory was that Catherine had suffered some kind of breakdown related to her childhood trauma and was now acting out a fantasy of protecting children by eliminating predators. It was a compelling psychological narrative that fit the evidence perfectly. What Agent Park didn't know was that Catherine had been watching her approach from the window of a neighboring building. Using the surveillance skills that had kept her alive during 3 combat deployments, Catherine recognized the signs. Immediately, the way Agent Park positioned herself to watch multiple sightlines. The careful approach that suggested tactical training, the patient observation before making contact. This wasn't a routine interview. This was a carefully planned approach to a dangerous suspect. Catherine made a decision that would have surprised Agent Park. Instead of running or preparing for a confrontation, she walked out of the building and approached the FBI agent directly. Agent Park. I'm Catherine Hayes. I understand you want to talk to me. Agent Park's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon before she caught herself. The woman approaching her looked like a suburban volunteer worker, not a trained killer. But her psychological profile suggested extreme danger. Ms. Hayes, thank you for being cooperative. I'd like to ask you some questions about recent events in Phoenix. I'd prefer to do this downtown, Catherine said. Official setting recorded. Interview, legal representation present. This isn't the kind of conversation that should happen in a parking lot. Agent Park studied Catherine's face, looking for signs of guilt, fear, or deception. What she saw was calm professionalism and a level of self-control that was consistent. With advanced military training, you have the right to an attorney, Ms. Hayes. I'm aware of my rights, Agent Park. I'm also aware that you have 4 dead child predators and a suspect with the perfect skill set to have killed them. Act! Let's handle this properly. Hours later, Catherine sat in the FBI field office in Phoenix. Across the table from Agent Park and Agent David Chen, with attorney Maria Santos beside her, Colonel Mitchell sat in the observation room watching through one-way glass. Ms. Hayes, Agent Park began, you have a very specific set of skills that match the profile of the person we're looking for. I have skills that were taught to me by the United States military for the purpose of eliminating enemies of this country, Catherine replied. The fact that someone is using similar techniques to kill child predators doesn't make me responsible for their actions. Agent Chen leaned forward. Where were you on the evenings of October 3rd, 7th, 12th, and 18th? Catherine's attorney started to object, but Catherine raised her hand. Home alone on all 4 dates. I don't have alibis, Agent Chen. I live alone, work part-time, and don't socialize. That's the life I chose after leaving the military. Why did you leave the military, Ms. Hayes? Agent Park asked. Catherine's attorney objected immediately. That information is classified and not relevant to the current investigation. It's relevant if it establishes motive, Agent Park countered. Catherine looked at her attorney, then at the agents. I left because I was no longer suitable for military service. The details are classified, but I can tell you that it involved a situation where my personal history interfered with my professional judgment. Personal history involving child abuse? Agent Park studied Catherine's file. Again, Ms. Hayes, the psychological profile for these killings suggests someone who sees themselves as protecting children by eliminating threats that the legal system has failed to address. Does that description sound familiar? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Agent Park, Every day I work with animals that have been abused, abandoned, and traumatized. I help them heal and find safe homes. That's how I protect the vulnerable. Now, not through violence, but you understand the motivation? I understand the frustration, but understanding and acting are different things. The interview continued for 3 hours, with Agent Park and Agent Chen probing Catherine's psychological state, access to weapons, her knowledge of the victims, and her whereabouts during the relevant time periods. Catherine answered every question calmly and directly, neither defensive nor overly cooperative. As the interview concluded, Agent Park felt frustrated. Catherine Hayes fit the profile perfectly, but there was no direct evidence linking her to the crimes. Her demeanor suggested either complete innocence or exceptional self-control. That evening, as Catherine returned to her apartment under FBI surveillance, she found Colonel Mitchell waiting in her living room. "How did they treat you?" Colonel Mitchell asked. "Professionally. They're good at their jobs." Catherine sat down across from her former commander. "Sarah, we need to talk about why you're really here." Colonel Mitchell's expression grew serious. "Because I know something the FBI doesn't know. Something that could either clear you completely or make you look even more guilty. Which is, it's the real reason you retired from active duty." Catherine's face went carefully neutral. "That's classified, not anymore. I've been authorized to declassify the relevant portions of your file if it becomes necessary to clear you of these charges. And what will that accomplish besides destroying what's left of my privacy?" Colonel Mitchell pulled out a secure tablet and showed Catherine a classified document. "It will prove that you didn't kill those 4 men in Phoenix. Because during the time period when they were killed, you were under psychological evaluation and medication that would have made it impossible for you to perform those precise combat techniques." Catherine read the document, her expression growing darker with each line. "Sarah, if you release this information, it doesn't just affect me. It affects the families of the people involved in the original incident." "I know." "Catherine, they're building a case against you for quadruple murder. If we don't provide an alternative explanation, then find the real killer," Catherine said firmly. "Don't destroy other people's lives to save mine." Colonel Mitchell studied Catherine's face. "You really didn't do this, did you?" "No, I didn't, but I wish I had the courage to." Their conversation was interrupted by Catherine's secure satellite phone. She looked at the caller ID and frowned. "Who has this number besides me?" she asked Colonel Mitchell. "Nobody." Catherine answered the call on speaker. "Ms. Hayes." The voice was electronically distorted, clearly using voice modification software. "I've been watching the news coverage of your arrest. Who is this?" "Someone who knows you didn't kill those 4 men because I did." Colonel Mitchell immediately began tracing the call while Catherine kept the caller talking. "Why are you calling me?" "Because you're taking the blame for something you didn't do, and that's not justice. You've suffered enough. How do you know about my suffering?" "'Cause I know your story, Catherine. I know that you understand why those men had to die." Catherine felt a chill of recognition. "You're a military." Was military. "Like you, I found that civilian justice isn't sufficient to protect children from predators. Unlike me, you decided to do something about it. Unlike you, I don't have the psychological constraints that prevent action." The line went dead. Colonel Mitchell looked at Catherine with new understanding. "Catherine, this person knows you personally. They know your psychological profile, your military background, your personal history." "More than that," Catherine said quietly. "They know about the psychological evaluation, the medication, the reasons I can't act on my protective instincts." Catherine was already moving toward her secure communications equipment. "Someone with access to classified military psychiatric records. Someone who's been watching me. Someone who decided that if I couldn't protect children, they would do it for me." As Catherine began the process of identifying her mysterious protector, Agent Park was in the FBI field office, realizing that her perfect suspect might actually be the key to finding the real killer. Asterisk. The truth about Catherine Hayes was more complex than anyone had imagined. She wasn't a vigilante serial killer. She was the inspiration for one. Someone who knew her story had decided to act on impulses that Catherine's psychological treatment had taught her to control. The hunt for the real Reaper was just beginning. Catherine Hayes found herself in the unusual position of helping The FBI tracked down someone who had killed in her honor. Sometimes, the most dangerous predators are the ones who believe they're protecting the innocent.